Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging headfirst into a topic that should be on every commercial operator's mind: disaster recovery. But we aren't talking about the cleanup. We are starting with a much more sobering premise.
It is a stark premise, but it's absolutely essential. The truth is, businesses often fail long before the physical disaster, the flood, the fire, the pipe burst even arrives.
Exactly. We all see the headlines about the physical damage, but what our source material reveals is that the true existential threat to a company isn't the water or the smoke itself.
No, not at all.
It's the invisible structural failure of preparedness, of planning, and in a vendor alignment that just silently compounds the recovery time and multiplies the final cost.
That's a great way to put it. Think of it this way. The physical incident is the trauma, but the internal disarray is the infection that turns a manageable injury into a catastrophic loss.
Okay, so let's unpack this for you, for the listener. Our mission today is to give you the blueprint for controlling and mitigating these commercial disaster costs. We're deep diving into the 5 most costly mistakes businesses make, not during the chaos, but months, even years in advance. These are the silent liabilities just waiting to detonate.
And we have to acknowledge that the stakes are rising. The recovery environment today is far less forgiving than it was even a couple of years ago.
What's shifting on that operational landscape? What does this new era, heading toward 2026, demand of businesses that maybe 2024 didn't?
We are seeing a significant tightening across the board. It's driven by insurer expectations and, frankly, public tolerance.
Okay.
There are requirements for a much faster dispatch and deployment, far more rigorous documentation standards, and critically, a mandatory shift toward what we call material-first salvage strategies.
Wait, hold on. Material-first salvage. That sounds like a technical term for just saving furniture, but I'm guessing it has profound financial implications.
Oh, it does. It means proving you took every reasonable step to save the highest value, longest lead time materials, things like carpeting, specialized equipment, unique fixtures, before you resort to demolition and replacement.
And if you don't,
prioritize saving those items, and quickly, you're looking at higher replacement costs and massively extended procurement cycle times.
and if time is the enemy, as we know it is, that extension is deadly.
And on top of that, community trust and reputation are now recovery accelerators or inhibitors.
What do you mean by that?
Negative local perception, how your recovery looks to the public, can now actively hamstring the recovery effort. You can create zoning issues, neighbor complaints, or even just general negative sentiment that discourages staff or customers from coming back.
That's a critical insight. So for the businesses listening, what are the industries most exposed to this kind of high-stakes environment?
We see the highest vulnerability in complex operations, specifically ones that serve the public or rely on just-in-time manufacturing.
Like what?
Schools and educational facilities, city and county facilities, large healthcare spaces, retail chains, manufacturers, and multi-tenant offices. They're all on the front line.
So here is the central risk statement from the sources we analyzed. Unprepared businesses lose time, money, and reputation at the exact same moment.
Yes.
And that simultaneous synchronized hit is what pushes otherwise viable organizations right over the edge.
And what's fascinating here is the data that really underpins this problem. Business downtime costs are not linear. They are exponential.
Exponential, not linear. That's a huge distinction that completely changes how you should view risk budgeting. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Absolutely. So if a business loses, say, $10,000 in revenue on the first day, you might expect $70,000 lost after a week. That's linear.
Right, simple math.
But exponential loss means the damage compounds. By week 2, you're not just losing revenue. You've lost key members who found new jobs, you face contractual penalties for missed deadlines, and your market share has already been aggressively absorbed by your competitors.
So the longer you wait, the more those non-monetary losses staff, reputation, contracts start to accelerate the financial loss.
Precisely. The second and third weeks are often the organizational killers. And that brings us directly to the most expensive invisible cost in the entire commercial restoration process.
Which is?
It is cycle time.
Cycle time.
It's the total duration from the minute the incident occurs to the minute the business is fully operational and the claim is closed. Every single day added to that cycle time doesn't just add a fixed dollar amount, it eats exponentially into the bottom line because of all those compounding factors.
And the 5 mistakes we're about to discuss all feed into that.
They're all errors of omission that directly and unnecessarily inflate that cycle time.
Okay, so if cycle time is the enemy and these mistakes create a multiplier effect, we have to start where the clock starts ticking fastest, the first hours.
The initial reaction phase is where success or failure is so often determined. And the very first point of failure, the biggest unforced error, is not having a dedicated relationship with a high-quality restoration vendor before the loss occurs.
So the mistake isn't just about money, it's about triage. If you don't have a relationship, is mistake one. No vendor relationship before the loss, really just about a slow dispatch.
It's about priority. When chaos hits, a vendor fielding a cold call from an unknown company is going to dispatch them after their pre-aligned clients. It just makes sense.
Of course.
The failure mode here is obvious yet devastating. Your first 48 hours are chaotic and slow. You have no priority response reserved. And crucially, you have no pre-negotiated scope, which means the vendor has to spend time assessing your risk before they even start working.
And what's the real cost of waiting, say, 12 hours for a team versus 2 hours?
It directly escalates the severity of the loss. Water continues to wick up walls, smoke settles deeper into materials, mold begins its growth cycle. If the vendor can't get there fast with the right resources, more materials just become unsalvageable.
Which guarantees longer downtime.
It guarantees longer downtime, pushes those costs onto the exponential curve faster, and dramatically lowers the survival odds for the business. You basically paid retail for a slow response, and the damage got worse while you waited.
And you often see that immediate chaos then feeds the second critical failure point, which is all about information control.
That's right, because even if the fastest crew in the world arrives on site, they can run directly into mistake two. No documented building intelligence.
This sounds administrative, but when you look at the implications, it's not minor at all, is it? When disaster strikes, confusion becomes the ultimate bottleneck.
Confusion is the bottleneck. The failure mode is the simple lack of foundational knowledge. The restoration team arrives ready to start extracting water, but they can't.
Or not.
Because no centralized contacts for utilities are available, the main shutoffs are unlabeled, the facilities manager is unreachable, no one knows where the specialized equipment is located. You don't even have a list of what kind of flooring or drywall you have.
I mean, what's the most absurd thing a restoration team has had to stop work for because they couldn't find a simple piece of building intelligence?
Oh, I've heard of a crew that had to wait 3 hours because nobody knew the access code to the server room door. They needed to shut down the HVAC unit that was just spreading smoke residue everywhere.
3 hours.
3 hours of waiting while corrosion continued, all for a 5-digit code that should have been in an emergency binder. Decisions stall because these basic critical facts are missing, and that small delay causes the cycle time to just explode from day one.
So you solve the relationship problem, you solve the intelligence problem, but then you run into the third issue, which is entirely internal. And that's mistake number 3, assuming speed without pre-alignment.
This is a classic organizational failure mode. Everyone wants the recovery to be fast, but they assume speed is purely a factor of vendor capability. It's not.
So what is it?
The failure is that your insurance contacts, your facilities teams, and your restoration partners are all operating in separate silos with completely different objectives.
Their expectations are misaligned.
Completely. The facilities manager might want the quickest patch job to reopen. The insurer wants detailed documentation before authorizing the next phase. And the vendor is trying to run a full mitigation while balancing those two conflicting goals.
So the scope of work gets delayed?
It gets delayed because every party has to meet, negotiate, and agree after the incident, slowing everything down.
That makes the cost difference stark. Contrast the two approaches for us, recovery without alignment versus recovery with it.
Well, when you lack alignment, recovery becomes reactive, linear, and inherently expensive. Think of it like a relay race where one runner has to stop completely, tap the next runner, and give them complex instructions before they can even start.
And with pre-alignment?
With pre-alignment, recovery is planned, parallel, and efficient. Teams can overlap, documentation standards are agreed upon in advance, and multiple steps get executed simultaneously. You're effectively compressing time.
That brings us to mistake 4. No emergency ready profile or ERP or some equivalent rapid reference plan. Everyone knows they need a plan, but why is failing to have one so disastrously costly in practice?
Because planning is what empowers the staff who are actually there when the incident occurs. The failure mode isn't just a missing binder on a shelf.
Right.
It's the lack of a rapid reference document for immediate staff action. They're missing essential photo documentation of the facility, which you need for insurance pre-loss validation. And there's no immediate flowchart to guide their crucial, time-sensitive first steps.
So what's the consequence when staff hesitate for just 5 minutes in that initial response?
Simply put, no plan means no compression of time. If staff don't know what valve to shut off or where the fire panel is or which number to call first, and it's not their insurance agent, it's the vendor, every action takes longer. They waste precious minutes just figuring out logistics.
And when every action takes longer.
Every vendor subsequently costs more due to extended hours, an increased scope of work, and having to wait for access or authorization.
So the lack of a simple checklist in advance directly inflates labor costs down the line. That's a powerful linkage.
It is. It's the highest leverage moment you have.
Now we move outside the immediate structure and look at the long-term impact with mistake number 5. Poor continuity planning post-incident. This goes beyond the physical damage and hits the lifeblood of the business, its reputation and its cash flow.
That's the failure that kills you financially after you stabilize the building. The failure mode here is neglecting the external and financial elements required for long-term survival.
Like what?
This includes failing to create a staging plan that considers the public, ignoring neighborhood optics, meaning how your recovery looks to the community, and maintaining incomplete or messy documentation trails.
We talked about community friction earlier. Where does the direct, measurable cost manifest from ignoring that external view?
It hits the bottom line through reputation damage and financial friction. Ignoring neighborhood optics like letting debris block sidewalks or running loud equipment late at night without warning immediately leads to community friction, complaints, and negative reviews.
And the financial side.
And then there's the devastating financial chain of events. Documentation gaps create billing gaps, which subsequently create debilitating cash flow gaps for the business that's just trying to survive the recovery.
That sequence documentation failure, creating cash flow failure, is a stunning example of that invisible cost structure we talked about. You need cash to operate, but if the documentation isn't perfect, the insurance payment just stalls.
Exactly. The business is structurally fixed, but it dies because its cash flow starved during a 3-month billing reconciliation delay. Local trust erodes precisely when you need it most, and your recovery becomes financially unstable.
This brings us to the synthesis, then. We've identified 5 failures: lack of relationships, intelligence, alignment, planning, and continuity.
And the core principle we can extract from all these failures is that these 5 elements are what compress time and dramatically reduce the total loss impact. They are the tools required to move the business away from that exponential failure curve.
So if the operator listening today takes away one key concept, what should it be?
The one-sentence takeaway, the most vital piece of knowledge that should govern all future risk strategy is this: the best response plan is built before the incident, not after.
Let's make these abstract concepts tangible. Let's look at specific actions taken by businesses that do have a plan. Give us some concrete examples of these principles in action.
Okay, let's revisit material-first salvage strategies. This isn't just a suggestion, it's an operational imperative. A prepared business knows that its specialized server room flooring costs 6 weeks and $50,000 to replace.
That's information they have on hand.
Exactly. That information, documented in advance, means the response team immediately prioritizes mitigating that specific floor, not just the common office carpet. This directly protects the balance sheet and dramatically shortens the recovery timeline because they aren't waiting on long lead items.
What about those operational details, like precise pack-out procedures? How does that move the needle on cycle time?
Pack-out is where your documentation gaps really show up. The rigor of maintaining a strict chain of custody for every single item packed out. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of files or pieces of equipment sometimes.
Especially in certain industries.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially in compliance-heavy sectors like healthcare or manufacturing. If the documentation is messy, you lose trust with the insurer, you can't prove what was packed, and the entire billing process stalls, leading right back to that cash flow gap we discussed.
And when we hear about structural drying in occupied facilities, that sounds incredibly disruptive and complex to manage.
It demands the utmost pre-alignment and communication. The prepared business already has a strategy in place to contain the damage, manage noise, and cordon off sections while allowing the non-affected parts of the business to continue operating partially.
Which you can't do on the fly.
No way. That requires knowing the precise layout, the ventilation systems, and having a synchronized plan with the facility team before the trucks even leave the depot.
Then there is the external element, the pre-planned staging coordination that protects community relations.
This is your mitigation for mistake 5. A good plan includes a pre-drawn map of where the large semi-trucks will park, where the debris skip bins will be placed, and how high the noise levels can be during certain hours.
To avoid those neighbor complaints.
Right. If staging blocks neighborhood access or just looks unsightly for weeks, Community friction starts immediately. Pre-planning this detail keeps the recovery running smoothly because you don't have neighbors calling the city to shut down your operations.
Finally, let's circle back to the absolute necessity of meticulous documentation. Beyond the items themselves, why is accurate, real-time documentation such a powerful tool?
Because it is the ultimate validator. Every hour of labor, every cubic foot of drying, every specialty material saved, it all needs immediate, clear proof.
Proof for the insurer.
For the insurer, yes. Accurate, real-time documentation accelerates billing accuracy and prevents those crippling cash flow gaps. It's the proof that validates the expense, moving the whole process forward in parallel, not linearly.
This deep dive has really highlighted how much control businesses actually have over their recovery success, even though they can't control the event itself.
That is the core takeaway. Prepared businesses recover in parallel, they preserve valuable materials, they dramatically shorten downtime, and they protect their priceless reputation.
And that vendor partnership is key. Seeking a vendor partnership before a loss is not just about getting faster service. It's about accessing essential pre-loss planning services for water mitigation, fire restoration, mold remediation, and even specialized pathogen deep cleaning, all of which compress time later when it matters most.
So that proactive step transforms a potential existential threat, that exponential killer, into a costly but ultimately manageable hiccup. It turns a reactive crisis into an executable, pre-approved plan.
Precisely.
So for you, the learner, we'll leave you with this final provocative thought, building on everything we've discussed today. If cycle time is confirmed to be the single most expensive invisible cost in commercial restoration, how quickly and with what level of accuracy could you access the essential building intelligence required to save the first 48 hours of your recovery plan? Think about that. The first 2 days could be the difference between organizational failure and organizational survival.